We live in a crazy world. It's crazy for a lot of reasons, but not the least of which is our obsession with time. So how many of you in this room here tonight have ever felt like you just don't have enough hours in the day to get everything done? Raise your hand. Okay, that looks like just about everyone. Awesome. So you'll probably understand what I'm saying when I when I say that our lives today are just go, go, go. It's 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. Our bosses and our clients expect us to be tethered to our cell phones. Books are topping the bestseller list with titles like Get Things Done or GTD, because who has time to say full words anymore? And this year, Americans are going to leave 459 million vacation days unused. Oh, right, and tonight, you're all sitting at an event whose sole purpose is to get speakers to enlighten you in 5 minutes or less. Yes, folks, we are obsessed with time. But I have a little secret I'm going to share with all of you tonight, and it probably sounds pretty radical in this context. The world is not going to end if you take some time off. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. And here's how I know. 2 years ago, I was probably one of the worst productivity addicts on the planet. I thought I was living life to the fullest, but actually I was just filling up my life with as many things as possible, which, as I've discovered, is an entirely different thing. The only times I was actually really conscious of what I was doing were the times when I was in my car running between one activity and the next. All the rest of it was just kind of a blur. So I decided that 2012 was going to be the year when I said enough. And I gave myself permission to do what I needed to do to find out if there was a different way to live. Over the course of about 9 months, I quit my job. I sold almost everything I owned except what would fit in the back of my PT Cruiser. I packed up the car and I set off across the country on what I like to call my creative sabbatical. Now, the original plan was to spend 4 to 6 months out in Taos, New Mexico, which, if you don't know Taos, it's a town of about 6,000 people. I've grown up in the New York metro area, so at any given moment, there were probably 6,000 people I could call just to have a pizza delivered. So I figured I was in for some culture shock, but I really had no idea what else to expect. And for the first little while when I was out there, it wasn't looking pretty. I sat on the couch and I watched the Olympics. Okay, millions of people watched the Olympics last summer, right? But I watched the whole Olympics. From the time it came on at noon until the time the late night coverage ended around 3 in the morning, I was there. And I started to get a little worried because I thought, well, what if they're all right? Maybe once you stop working, you become a lazy couch potato and you just never want to do anything or get up off the couch ever again. But the good news, folks, is that it didn't take 6 months or even 6 weeks for me to rejoin the land of the living. After about 3 good weeks of rest and relaxation and watching the Olympics, I started noticing that I wanted to do things again. But this time I started with the ones that were really important to me. I volunteered at a riding program for disabled kids, found a dance class I loved. I built a new website for my business. I went hiking, did yoga. I learned to cook, and I actually sat down and enjoyed my meals every night, complete with wine and candlelight and Frank Sinatra in the background. And through all this, I learned what was probably the biggest lesson of the whole journey. I learned what it was like to live outside of time. Okay, actually, the biggest lesson was probably that I have a latent fear of giant hairy spiders that they have in Taos, especially when they come crawling out from the shower curtain, but that's for another speech. The point is that when I stopped fighting against the clock, I realized that I could live a full life and actually get things done without having to push myself to the brink of depletion and exhaustion in order to do it. So, the rest of the journey was replete with interesting stories. I made friends in cities across the country. I saw some beautiful landscapes. I even went line dancing with a cowboy named Bud in Idaho. And the best part was that I remember every single one of those moments, unlike the previous years that had just been a blur to me. So I want you all to take a minute and think about what it would be like if you stopped fighting against time, if you stopped treating it as something a limited resource that was just slipping away through your fingers, and instead imagine that you had just as much as you need. Imagine if.